Tremendous privilege to actually be here in this incredible yeshiva, in this incredible place, on this very auspicious night. We know that Sukkos has, its primary theme is Zman Simchasenu, time of our joy. We also know B'chag Nidonim Al Hamayim, that on Sukkos we're being judged over the water for the year, and that comes with a lot of other things as well. You know, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we had the big din of life itself, and there's different din, different judgment takes place at different points in the year. It's like the Shlach Kodesh described, because you can feel that very strange. Didn't we finish all the judgment? What's going on? The Shlach Kodesh says like a tree. You first got to determine how thick the trunk is going to be. If you got a rubbish, like a little thin tree that's not going to produce much, your best bet with all the branches is very limited. If you get a tremendous tree, you've done, even if you do half-hearted jobs through the year, you get good stuff going. So Rosh Hashanah determines the tree, but then the different Yom Tovim determine the big branches, and Sukkos is right at the beginning, determines one of the biggest branches of the year. So it's taking what we've done in principle, in theory, in Rosh Hashanah, and starting to translate it into action. But we don't have the emotions associated with Rosh Hashanah. A little bit in davening on Hoshana Rabbah and Shmini Atzeres, but for the most part we don't. For the most part, our emotional place is meant to be simcha, joy. And everything we do is designed to stimulate joy. Right? So living in the sukkah is meant to be meant to have rejoicing. The whole of Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people coming to the Beis HaMikdash, people bringing offerings, people having finished the harvest season. This is the time of year of huge, unparalleled simcha, the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the nightly events and dancing, singing that took place in the Beis HaMikdash. And even the Lulav and Esrog, this is how you would rejoice before Hashem for 7 days. Another time, I'm sure you've heard lots of shiurim about why moving into Sukkah brings us so much joy and why the Arba Minim do. But this seeming anomalous element of the whole time period, which just by the way, to put everything together, means we're being judged based on the simcha that we have. This is really the key to understand everything, is the rejoicing that we have with Hashem is the way that the water is being judged for the year. That's Rosh Hashanah was a different focus. There was also some aspects of joy, but it was the sense of my life is dedicated to you, Hashem, I don't live for anything else. Obviously that's in the background of Sukkos, but in Sukkos it's the emotion that comes to the fore is the simcha, the rejoicing that we have with it, and the dancing, the singing, everything that's associated with that. That now is the way Hashem brings the bracha into the world. The anomalous element is a minhag Ashkenaz, the strong Ashkenazic custom brought down by the Ramah, to read Koheles, one of the 5 Megillas of Tenach. You know, it's one of those ones which the English translation doesn't help us much. You know, Ecclesiastes. If someone doesn't know what Koheles is, they probably don't know what Ecclesiastes is. But Koheles is not the book of Tenach that would jump at a person obviously as the book to link ourselves to in the time of rejoicing. And for anyone who's actually read through it, and it might raise a question for you as it did for me for many, many years, which is I was bothered by the fact that it doesn't seem that there's a lot of new information as you go through the whole Sefer. It seemed to me that you could have summed up the entire book of Koheles in really 2 psukim. Hevel avolim omer Koheles, hevel avolim akol havel. Everything is meaningless. And soif davar kol nishma, the end when everything is heard, what do you got to do? Eselakim yirah, fear God, as mitzvahs shmar God, his mitzvahs, kizeh kol adam. That's all the human is. Everything else in life is meaningless. Serving Hashem is the key, and that's it. What did we need another 12 chapters basically to do? It feels, at least it felt to me, for many years, very repetitive, very much making lots of good Mussar points, but I didn't understand why I needed 12 chapters of it. Until one day I decided to do something which I should have done long before, which is go to Chazal, let's see the rabbis of the Gemara and the Midrash, and see how they understand Sefer Koheles. And today, you don't even need to be a big Talmud Chacham to do it. You have all these apps and this and that. You can click on here, click on there, see what's going on. But also, Baruch Hashem, we have everything translated into English, so it's very easy. And it turns out that Chazal once they give us a few little keys, the entire Sefer opens up to be a tremendous journey, and one that all of us are meant to go on in some way or another, or at least join at some stage. And I'll give you a bit of background, but to give the background, we can start with a few simple questions. Who is the author of Koheles? Shlomo Hamelech. How do we know he's the author? Because he says, Divrei Koheles ben David. These are the words of Koheles, son of David. Now we know of lots of children of David in Sefer Shmuel and in Divrei Yomim. We don't know of anyone called Koheles. But he's Melech b'Yerushalayim, king in Jerusalem. There were not a lot of sons of David who were king in Jerusalem. Adoniah wanted to be, never quite made it. Avshalom lasted a few days and certainly never had time to go and write this book. So there's only one, Shlomo Hamelech. So it's obviously Shlomo Hamelech, King Solomon. But it raises the interesting question why he refers to himself as Koheles. And what have you heard? So there's a few answers. Rashi brings some of them. One is that Kohel means to gather together. He gathers lots of wisdom in this Sefer, which is true. It does raise a question, why not Mishlei? Then Mishlei, another book Shlomo Hamelech authors could have been also called Koheles, but okay. Another reason given is that he was makil, he assembled the Jewish people. What event is this referring to? In the 8th chapter of the book of Malachim, book of Kings, Aleph, we read the tremendous event of the building, when the Beis HaMikdash was built and finished, and the Aron's brought in, the Ark is brought in, and he makes this week-long celebration, actually over Sukkos, and all the people were gathered together. He has these prayers to Hashem, right? Tremendous things. And we use the word to be makil, he gathers together the people. Okay, so we're getting some ideas to why he called himself Koheles, but why then in this book? Why doesn't he call himself Koheles in Shir HaShirim, for example, Song of Songs? Why not in Mishlei, in Proverbs? Like, why here? This doesn't seem to talk about the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, but we've got clue number one. Somewhere in there is going to be a bit of a clue to understanding this work. As a general rule, whenever you've got a really good kasha, a great question, it means that there's something we're missing, and when you add that piece in, it should now open up a universe. So there's our first clue. In the name Koheles, we need to think a bit more about that. Why? What's the link to the Beis HaMikdash? What's going on? The second clue comes from a Gemara. The Gemara in Shabbos discusses when the rabbi is deciding, we're working out which Sepharim go into Tenach. We lost prophecy, and now the question was, it was obvious, apart from the Torah, we've recorded so many prophetic writings, nevuahs, some of them are going to last with us forever. They've got the holiness of a part of Tenach. There was a question around the inspired writings. Some of them were obvious. Tehillim is going to go in. That's clearly was always a part of our canon, a part of our religious life. But there was one or two where there was a bit of debate. Should they be part of our Tanakh or not? Chazal have a category of other books called Sfarim Chitzonim, those that are outside. And outside means you cannot lane them or read them in a shul, right? You can't be koira. You're not allowed to be koira Sfarim Chitzonim. So there were books that lots of Jews read, and the Gemara even quotes some of these books, but they don't have holiness, and they're not allowed to be treated like books of Tanakh. Terrible thing if they are. And one of the debates surrounded the book of Koheles. And the Gemara in Shabbos, I'm not going to go through every single line, but the basic structure of the thinking was this. Some of the rabbis felt Koheles should not be admitted, even though it's by Shlomo Hamelech and has huge life wisdom, because it's full of contradictions, or at least it has some contradictions. There's no other book in Tanakh with contradictions. But the Gemara says, when did they decide to readmit it or to conclude that it does belong in Tenach? When they realized that it begins in a holy place and ends in a holy place. It begins with the words, Ma yisron la'adam b'chol amaloi. What benefit does a man have from all his labor, sheyamal, that he works, tachas hashamesh, under the sun? Now that sounds like an extremely pessimistic and not very Jewish way of thinking. No benefit to anything we do? What are you talking about? We're building the world with all the mitzvahs that we do and all the good things. No, say the rabbis, listen carefully. He didn't say there's no benefit to anything we do. There's no benefit to anything we do where its identity is under the sun. Our natural behavior doesn't achieve much. But if we link to that which is above the sun, the heavenly world, the holy spiritual world, then we can have impact. So even a line that seemed pessimistic and at first glance might seem very shocking, in fact has holiness to it. And of course it ends, Sof Dava Kol Nishma, when we've heard everything, Es Elokim Yirah, fear God, Es Mitzvos Shmar God, Es Mitzvah Kol Adam. This is all of the human. Okay, but notice we still haven't resolved the contradictions. Later the Gemara then explains how they resolved the contradictions. But think about that. They had a problem. The book has contradictions. Maybe it can't belong in Tenach. They then said, don't worry, it begins with holiness and ends with holiness. Therefore we can include it in Tenach. What's going on? The problem isn't solved, except there's an inescapable conclusion here. They didn't have a problem, there seemed to be contradictions. Their problem was they thought that it begins in a non-holy way and ends in a holy way. In other words, they thought the contradictions were rooted in different mindsets that Shlomo Hamelech had, King Solomon had. The opening parts are in a mindset that is not an ideal mindset. The closing parts are in an ideal mindset. What is this referring to? The great Shlomo Hamelech, the wisest person who ever lived? Where does his mindset ever go wrong? And the truth is, it's a chapter in Tenach, in Malachim Perek Yud Aleph, which I'll come back to. But the Gemara in fact, I'll tell you right now, the chapter, if you just read it superficially without commentary, it sounds like at the end of his life, King Solomon turned to idolatry and turned the whole of all of Israel to idolatry. If you read it a little bit more refined and subtly, and certainly with the eyes of Chazal, it wasn't as simple as that, but he'd married 1,000 wives. We have to explain that too. That's also mentioned in Koheles. Mostly non-Jewish or from tribes around and from idolatrous nations. And they had basically unleashed themselves and built their ministries and their embassies and everything. The whole country was just pumping away with idolatry. He lost control. And in that last chapter, he gets the prophecy from Achia HaShiloni that his kingdom is going to be split. His father David had unified the entire nation into one. It's all over. It lasted one and a half generations. It's finished. And essentially built into the prophecy visions of what could become the long-term destruction of so much of what we build as a Jewish people. Exile is now going to be centuries or millennia before we get it all right. So his life ends in tragedy, at least as far as the story in Tenach goes. What happened? The Gemara in Gittin tells us a fascinating story. One of these agaritas, which most, I should say, commentaries don't think we should take it on a very superficial level, but we should a little bit dig beneath the surface. Let me give you a very brief version of what the Agarata says, what the Gemara says. The Gemara in Gittin Simchas says that when King Solomon came to build the Beis HaMikdash, that's Koheles, right? He was building. He wanted to do something that was beyond. He knew that in the Torah there's a special commandment that when you build the altar, the Mizbeach, you cannot use iron. Anything is used as a weapon of war. And they used to have a special, in the desert, this worm, I don't know what it is, shamir, some creature that could cut the rock. And he said, I want my Beis HaMikdash, the house of God I build, to be completely made of like this. No iron chopping anything. How do I do it? Well, I've got to ask some demons. And how do we know he does it? Because in Koheles, in the second chapter, when he describes all his great buildings and achievements he's made in life, he refers to, amongst the many, many things he did, he talks about Ta'anugos B'nei Adam, right, in the 8th verse of the chapter, all the human luxuries, and then he adds the word Shida v'Shidos, which on a simple meaning means like kind of treasure chests or something, but it seems to be male and female, and the Gemara points out the word actually means demons. Shade is a demon, and male and female demons. And the story the Gemara says is, or at least the second interpretation, is that what he did is he agitated these demons against each other. I'll come back and explain what this means according to the Maharal soon. But just going with a simple reading of the Gemara. And they told him, we don't know where this shamir, where this special creature can be found, but you have to speak to the king of the demons. His name is Ashmedai. Some don't even mention his name at night or whatever, but okay. King of the demons, says the Gemara, and Shlomo Hamelech comes up with this whole elaborate plan to capture him, using Benayahu ben Yehoyada, who was his general, head of his Sanhedrin, and they get a chain with the name of Hashem on it. And they do a whole trap they prepare, and they trap the king of the demons. And Shlomo Hamelech keeps him trapped, and he eventually manages to get the Shamir, builds the Beis HaMikdash, And when all that's done and everything's finished, after a while he turns to this king of the demons and says to him, you're meant to be so powerful, like an incredibly powerful creature, Ra'im. You don't seem very powerful to me. You're sitting chained up like a little Nebuch. Nothing much going on over there. Where's your power? And this says to him, the king of the demons says, what you need to do is loosen the chain. I'm too tightly chained. I can't show you my power. Just give me an inch, proverbially. Just give me a little bit. Loosen the chain a bit. I'm not saying release me. So Shlomo Hamelech does it, loosens the chain with Hashem's name, and all of a sudden, a moment later, this being bursts out in power and throws King Solomon 400 measured distances out of Jerusalem, and then takes on his persona and becomes an imposter and sits on the throne instead of him. Presumably interpreting the idea of him allowing the state to become idolatrous, this was the demon. And King Solomon is walking, comes back to Jerusalem and says, Zaya Chalki Mekah, this is all I have left, the Pasuk in Koheles, in that same chapter. This is all I have left, meaning just my little stick. And he'd walk round to the rabbis and say what we now have as a Pasuk in Koheles, I, Koheles, was king of Israel in Jerusalem. And if somebody walks around Jerusalem saying, I'm the Mashiach, or I'm the king or something, so we say he's got suffering from Jerusalem syndrome. But if somebody says, I used to be the king, that's a little bit more unusual. So the rabbis say after a while, let's just check out if there's anything to this story. And they do their research and they discover it's true. And this one on the throne is not King Solomon. They pray and he's restored. And there's a debate in the Gemara, did he ever fully get back his kingship to what it once was? What's going on in this story? How does it link to the story of Malachim? So the Maharal tells us the following. The Maharal of Prague was one of the great openers up hundreds of years ago in really understanding how Chazal, how the rabbis talk, in the stories they write that are meant to design to awaken and arouse the ignorant or the child. But if you listen deeply and carefully, you have to be a little more prepared and mature and developed in your learning before you can really get to the full depths. And he points out that we don't really meet these demonic beings as actual crystallized physical beings. They live in some kind of intermediary realm between the physical and the spiritual. When they access us, it's through our mind. The demonic world penetrates, it may do damage in the physical world, but it meets us only in our minds. Creates moods, creates feelings, creates destructive thoughts. We encounter them inside our mental and spiritual world. And so what's going on with that simple insight? It gives us a whole new dimension to the story. You see, when King Shlomo had to encounter these demons and eventually chain them up, those demons manifest into the brains and minds of every human being. He, to build the Beis HaMikdash, had to climb to a world that was higher than them. He had to access something built between the 6th day and 7th day of creation. The 6 days produce the natural order, and the 7th day produces a vision of the world to come. So he's accessing something that is beyond the ordinary physical. And to do that, he himself must climb high enough that he can agitate his demons and have them all tied up and chained up, that nothing can unleash itself inside him. His mind is pure of the demonic, self-destructive and other destructive thoughts that we experience in our encounter with the demonic world. Every day, all the time. He has chained it down with his connection to God, and he is now able to access the realm of the Shamir, the realm that lies between the physical and the spiritual, and build a home of Hashem in this world that transcends the normal physical limits. Then he turns to this king of demons and says, why are you so powerful? Why does he do that? This we need to get back to. But before we do, let's understand what happens then in the story. Then what happens is, he unchains, and this chain, of course, is the chain of connection he has to Hashem. A chain with the name of God means he is so tied in his connection to Hashem, so deeply connected that nothing negative can unleash itself within him. It's all chained down. Just loosen your connection to Hashem slightly. And then he's thrown miles away. Means his mind gets taken over by every dark demonic force there is. And he is now a stranger in his own mind. The person sitting on the throne is not him. He has flashes of moments of sanity, flashes of moments of clarity, flashes of moments of his old spiritual self, and goes up to the rabbis and says, this is not me anymore. I don't recognize the person sitting on my throne. Pray for me, help me. And eventually they do. And the story of that journey is the story of Koheles. It begins in the darkest moment, when he literally opens up and says, Divrei Koheles ben David, this is me. I was the one trying to build the Beis HaMikdash. This is how it all began. That's why one of the reasons why I call myself Koheles, the one who gathered the Jews, the one who'd nearly done everything. And remember how far he'd come. My conclusion now is the world is a waste of time. Everything is meaningless. What can we achieve in our work that we do under the sun? That's what he said at that moment. So why did he unleash this? Why did he loosen his chain? What's he trying to do? So let's now add one more detail. King Solomon, Shlomo Hamelech, understood that he had a role in the world. You know what his role was meant to be? Mashiach ben David. You know, we're waiting for Mashiach ben David. There was a Mashiach ben David. His name was Shlomo Hamelech. He was Mashiach, the anointed one, anointed king of Israel. Ben David, son of David. And what is the Mashiach meant to do? Finish off all the wars. There was no wars in his lifetime. David, or at least not in his early years. David Hamelech had sorted that out. Build the Beis HaMikdash. He'd done that. Right? What's he meant to do after that? Now he's meant to bring the end of history. You know, there's only one event in Tenach, as far as I'm aware, that is measured in time from Yetzias Mitzrayim, from coming out of Egypt. And that is the building of the Beis HaMikdash, King Solomon's Beis HaMikdash. Because it says 480 years since they came out of Egypt. In other words, the whole point of coming out of Egypt was this: to build the permanent house of God in the world. As they're crossing the sea, we're going to make a holy place for you, God. This is what we're going to do. So we built now a place for you in the world, Hashem. What else is there to do? I fulfilled the dreams of my father who unified the nations, says Shlomo. I built the house of God. Why is the world not coming to perfection? And we read the next chapter of the books of Kings and Malachim. Well, he's now got to bring all the nations of the world to Hashem. He's got to make every part of existence serve Hashem. Those that are currently idolatrous, even the Yetzer Hara. We say every day in Shema, V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha, you should love Hashem your God, B'chol levavecha, with all your heart, B'chol nafshecha, with all your soul, B'chol modecha, with all your resources. And what does the Mishnah say about the word levavecha? Why is it not written libecha, with all your heart? Why are there two bases in? Because there's two hearts. Shnei tzarecha, both your Yetzer Tov, you've got to serve God with your positive drives, the Yetzer Hara and your negative drives. How do you serve God with your negative drives? Says Shlomo Hamelech, I can serve Hashem with my positive drives. I've written a whole book on it. It's called Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs. I know what to do. What I must be missing is, how do I bring the idolatrous world to God? And he tries that in chapter 10, in 9 and 10 in Malachim. He brings the Queen of Sheba, and all these things, everyone's coming. And he starts marrying all these wives. The Torah said not to, but he felt that's true for a normal king. I've now got to do the tikkun, the great rectification of history. I've got to do that. And how do I serve Hashem with my Yetzer Hara, with my negative drives? Mine is so totally subdued, says King Solomon, that it doesn't have any space to operate inside me. So he asks its manifest form, its demonic form. What is this power of yours? How do I turn you into a servant of Hashem? And it says, well, first you have to let me a little bit loose. At the moment you're strangling me. I can't show you anything. So he lets it loose. It's the same process, slightly breaking the rules for the sake of trying to bring the final rectification. We've climbed the mountain. We're almost at the final peak. Hashem, what I still need to do? Oh, I know what I need to do. A little bit different to the way the rules have been till now. Just, let's have all the idolatrous world within us. We'll sort it out. We'll rectify it. Let's let the Yetzer Hara out and a bit free. We'll rectify it. Hashem never said to do that, however much sense it may make. And next thing he knows, give it an inch, it's taken everything. And now Shlomo Hamelech has come crashing down in a mind where he no longer even recognizes himself, where he is a stranger. In a world where the whole country's fallen apart into idolatry. where the place is now more pagan than the pagan civilizations around it, where the inevitable pathway now is to rupture, where it's going to be millennia of dark horrors for the Jewish people, and Shlomo Hamelech feels like he's the greatest failure who has ever walked planet Earth. He's the man who stood at meters from the peak and then has slid all the way down to the lowest trough and will never climb up there again in his lifetime. And he asks the question, is everything just a waste of time? Ma Yisrael Adam, what can we add? B'chol ha'mola, in all the work that we do, tachas ha'shamash, under the sun. And he goes like this on and on. Dor ha'lech, a generation comes, Dor ba, another one goes. Haaretz lo le'mamedes, we haven't brought Mashiach. I mean, this is how we sometimes feel. If they didn't bring in previous generations, what are we going to do? The sun rises, the sun sets, it goes round and round. Everything just goes back to where it was. The rivers flow into the sea never changes. Nothing changes. Everything that was is that's all there's going to be. You can't change the world. People say, hey, look, I've got something new. Nah, it's been around forever. Nobody really makes an impact. You might read about some people in a history book, but the world's moved far on beyond them. That's the introduction to Koheles. It's written in a place of his incredible darkness. Emotional darkness, psychological, spiritual darkness. And this is why the rabbis thought maybe we shouldn't put Koheles into Tenach. The contradictions are coming because it's a chronicle of Shlomo Hamelech's journey from his darkest moments of life to where he came out on the other side. And it may be a very valuable journey, and maybe the last few chapters in the place of great enlightenment belong in Tenach, but not these first few chapters. They might be read as a psychology book or something, until they realize that's not correct. In every single posuk, I'm not going to go through every chazal here, you realize there's a hint. Shlomo Hamelech understands, I'm in a dark place, but I know there's a pathway out. And that's why he hints, there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing we can add under the sun. I know if I can get in touch with a deeper spiritual reality, I can get out of this. So this is Shlomo Hamelech's flashes of, if you like, sanity, flashes of spirituality, flashes of being in exactly the right place. The moment he comes to the rabbis and says, I used to be this, I want to be this again. But this is the world that I look around and see now. So it's actually written in purity. This is a pure tzaddik going through the most terrible darkness and showing us how to come out of it. But because he wrote it in his moments of tzidkus, and that's the chronicle we have, we can read every single part. And by the way, what that means is that every part of our life journey, we're just somewhere in the book of Koheles. We just got to work out where we are. Okay, what comes next? I wish I had all night. We could actually go through the entire thing. I'm just going to jump in and get some of the key points that he gets to. By the way, if you read it very carefully, once you've seen this, you'll realize every pasuk just reads like a glove. He starts telling us the story. I Koheles, Hayisi melech al Yisrael b'Yerushalayim. I used to be the king of all Israel in Jerusalem. V'nosati es libi lidrosh v'lasur. I told my heart to go and explore chokhmah, wisdom, al kol shenas nasa tachas shamayim, on everything done under the heaven. By the way, the word kol appears, is essentially the book of Koheles is a meditation on that word. The word for all or everything or everyone. It begins with hakol havel, everything is meaningless. It carries on over here, I told my heart to explore kol, everything. Later on we'll have lakol zman va'es, there's a time for everything under the sun. A time for war, a time for peace, a time for joy, a time for crying. Later on, and all the way through the Sefer, you'll see this is appearing again and again. Something's going to be attached to Kol HaChaim, to all of life. You'll just, once you notice this, you'll see how often this occurs and how each time it changes slightly. And it will end with Sof Davar HaKol Nishma, when you've heard everything, Es Elokim Yirasim Zeh Kol Ha'adam, this is the whole of the human. Okay, so I told my heart to explore all, because I already know how to serve Hashem with the good. How do I deal with everything? How do I even bring evil into it? And that's what the Pasuk says. I wanted to see, sorry, how to go? He says, yeah. Who inyan ra? I wanted to understand the nature of evil. Why has Hashem given us this Yetzer Hara? It must be that there's a way to use it for the good. I looked at everything done under the heavens. It all seems no good. And once I let it go, it all became a disaster. Now it's irreparable. What a disaster, what a terrible decision I made in doing that. I can't ever get it back again. Tibarti, I'm going to tell you what happened. I spoke to my heart and I said, look, I've got up, nobody's ever had the wisdom that I've had. So if anyone can do this, it's me. Libi ra harbe chochmodas. My heart, you've seen lots of the good, the yetzer tov, the wisdom, the knowledge. Ve'etna libi, so I gave my heart permission, ladas chochma v'das, to know good, all the wisdom and all the knowledge, v'hoylelus v'sichlus, and all the insanity of the world as well. Look, that's called letting Ashmedai loose. That's exactly what it is. Yodati, and then I knew what an idiot I was, what a terrible decision I made, because now the more wisdom I had, the more chaos, the more frustration, the more knowledge, the more pain. And he starts going through and he starts telling me, look, I tried to then get out of this. I'm now in this dark, horrible place. I said, let me get myself out. And he says, I told my heart to have wine. Hearts can't have wine. Heart means a mind. It means I said, let's have simcha. Let me go back in my mind and remember the good times. And he starts doing it. Let me tell you all about the amazing. Let me stop this depression now and this darkness and this spiritual dark place. Let me go back to the joyful moments of my life. Do I remember when Higdalti Masai, when I did such great things? Bonisili Botim, I built beautiful homes. Do you know which two homes we're referring to? The Beis HaMikdash home of God and his own home. Right, chapters 6 and 7 of Melachim. Not I planted the beautiful vineyards, and he goes through everything he did to try to bring himself back to remember the good. And I was even managed to stay with wisdom, and I let everything then join. I had simcha, and it was real simcha. But now, having tried to get myself back to that mindset, I turned around again, and all my actions, it was all for nothing. It was all a failure. Do you see what's going on? Once you realize this insight Chazal have given us, it's like the whole book just fits like a glove. It's the story Shlomo Hamelech's telling us. And then that's it. I saw Chochmah. He even says, I could see that Chochmah is so much better than wisdom is so much better than idiocy and insanity. But I couldn't see it in my heart. In my heart, I just said, everyone's going to die. No one's going to achieve anything. That's where he gets to. Okay, by the end of the second chapter, the chapters are not Jewish divisions, by the way, so they don't always end in the right places. But by the end of what happens to be almost at the end of the second chapter, he starts telling himself, he starts the journey out of this. And his first step is gratitude. Hakaras hatov. He actually says, Ein tov, if there's no good just eating, let me just eat and drink. That's where Torah teaches us that we can really appreciate gratitude. That I appreciate the world. You eat and you're satisfied. Then you bench, you bless Hashem. And from there we learn all other blessings. We live a life. So Shlomo Hamelech does it. He says, let me try that. And then I'll realize also, I'll show my soul more things. And he starts noticing all the things he has to be grateful for. Right? As Rav Noach Weinberg Zatzal used to say, Hashem could have made us have an urge to eat food, like we have an urge to go to the bathroom. We have to do it, and that's it. Biologically, that would be enough to keep us alive. But instead, he gave us this incredible experience where we can enjoy. We can sit together socially. We can enjoy good food. And it's fine. So let me be Makkah. So Shlomo Hamelech starts saying, let me just realize the blessings I have. Because no one had more than me in life. So let me stop being so ungrateful and just focus on that. That leads straight away to another level called bitachon. Trust in Hashem. Like he starts saying, La kol zman va'es. I get it. There's a time for everything. Maybe I made a mistake in trying to control the world and being cleverer than God. HaKadosh Baruch Hu never said finish the world. So let me just accept that the world works the way Hashem wants it to work. There's a time for this, a time for that, a time for this. I did maybe the right thing, but at the wrong time. It wasn't the time. And I'm not going to go through all of what happens in the third chapter, but he basically then tries to talk to his heart. Whenever he's talking to his heart, he's trying to rectify himself. And it doesn't work. His heart pushes back and starts messing him up again. But he kind of fights back, and he can't win. He can't get rid of his negative drives, but they can't get rid of him either. And it's, by the way, very powerful for us. As a bedrock for all our avodas Hashem, two things. Hakaras hatov, just focusing every day on how many blessings we have. And number two, focusing on Hashem runs the world. Just let him do the job of running the world. That's it. We've got to ask ourselves, what do you want from me, Hashem? Not what I want you to do. But then he says that's not enough. I can't just sit back and let Hashem run the world and do nothing, because as what we call chapter 4, V'shavti ani ve'era, I sat back again and I saw, as kol hashukim, all the people suffering in the world. Asher nasan tachas hashamesh, once again it's under the sun. Whenever the things that are imperfect is always under the sun, whenever he's looking at perfection, he talks about under the heaven. Under the sun, and you've got people crying. How can I just be happy and dancing away on Simchas Torah and having my bitachon Hashem when there's other people out there in the world suffering? This year, suffering going on. How can I just be happy? How can I just sit back and say, oh, it's all okay, have bitachon? Some guy comes knocking on your door, his life falling apart, you go, don't worry, Hashem's got it all covered. I just lost it, God forbid they tell you they just lost a child and just had this gone wrong with that. Don't worry, it's all good, you can't do that. So Shlomo Hamelech, Hashem put me in a world of people crying and suffering. I don't have time to go into it now, but he leaves lots of hints in those psukim in the beginning of the 4th chapter, back to the Garden of Eden. Look at it in your own pleasure, in your own time, and you'll see. Cain and Havel, they all appear in that. Anyway, but he starts to notice the jealousies and the hatreds, and he links things back to the sin of Adam, and he realizes the sin of living in our own subjective bubble, self-centered existence destroys the world, and he starts to, okay, so I realize Tova Shnaim and Echad. Better to have relations with people, work as partners with people, see the world through other people's eyes, and they see it through our eyes, and together that's how we have to build a world. And then he starts talking about how to approach Hashem. I'm going to jump. There's a lot of chapters, and each chapter adds a layer, and a layer, and a layer. But what is his conclusion? In the 8th chapter, really in the 7th chapter, he starts talking about it's better to go to a funeral than it is to go to a birthplace. And you can think it's very depressing, but it's actually, apart from the Musa side of self-development, of remember life is short and you've got to live it to its fullest, there's also a concept called the whole human being, which only crystallizes when a person leaves this world. In the 8th chapter, he introduces a concept which I want to really dwell on for a few moments, because that's the key to understanding the whole book, Sefer, the whole of our life, and how it shows us joy, and how it brings us to Sukkos, and how it brings us to Shmini Atzeres and everything else. So let's have a little look. Says King Solomon, says Shlomo Hamelech like this. First of all, he goes back to the words kol. He says, he talks again like all these, like he's done many times before. And then he talks about one who is mechuba el kol hachayim. Somebody who is connected to all of life. Sorry, this is the person. So somebody who's connected to kol hachayim, to the whole of life. And what does he mean by that? And then he starts talking about the difference between it's better to be the living dog than a dead lion. And he goes to lots of psukim about life and death. And Chazal, the rabbis, learned from here that it's better to be, so that tzaddikim, righteous people, even when they've left the world, are called alive, chayim. Rishaim, the evil, even in their lifetime, are called mesim, dead. What's going on? What is this book of kol hachayim, of all of life? So those who were with us when we did the shiurim on the Rambam and Hilchos Tshuva will remember this. There's a very powerful point here. What does it mean to be connected to all of life? How can we be connected to all of life? How can I right now be connected to somebody in China? How can I be connected to somebody who hasn't been born yet? How can I be connected to people who died thousands of years ago? The Vilna Gaon points out that the word kol, which means all, is spelt in 2 different ways, voweled in 2 different ways. Kol with a cholom, and kol with an oh, with a comma. It's very similar but different. And he says they actually have a subtly different meaning. Kol with a cholom means each individual. Kol with a commas, oh means the whole thing as one. You're not attached to every individual who ever lived. Chol hachayim. You're attached to kol hachayim, the whole of life as one. Because on a very deep level, all of history, all of existence, every human who's walked this planet, every Jew who's ever lived, we're all one. And what that means is, it's a bit like in modern science, we have some analogies for this. They talk about chaos, about the sensitive dependence upon initial conditions. Something like the weather is so exquisitely sensitive to so many things that you hear the story of the butterfly flaps its wings in one country, eventually leads to some whole cataclysmic weather condition in another, which is true. But now imagine this. Imagine this butterfly decides to make a tornado. And it flaps and flaps and flaps. What's it going? It never, never, ever will achieve a tornado. Because it's not a butterfly alone. There's thousands or maybe millions of factors that generate this weather condition. There's very subtle variances in temperatures, pressures coming in from all over the planet. It's true, had the butterfly not also flapped its wings, something else might have happened. That's how sensitive the whole system is. But the butterfly alone can't do it. That is the key to understanding life. No one alone can do it, not even Shlomo Hamelech. If you try to control the world does not get controlled. The Rambam says the world's always poised. It seems to never decide whether it's always stuck being a Beinoni. But you're meant to feel this action, this one action could tilt the whole world. Yes. Meaning not the butterflies trying to make a tornado. That would be ludicrous. That would be stupid. But the butterfly has to flap its wings in the right way. Imagine Hashem came down and said, butterfly, listen, here's exactly the technique you should use in this situation, in this situation, this situation. I'm telling you as creator of the universe, you'll never understand this. But this is what will change the world. As a Jewish people, we're mechuyev to want to change the world. We're obligated to. Every one of us has to wake up and say, the world's created for me. We have to see with the problems like Shlomo Hamelech saw, the problems in the world, people suffering. We have to dedicate our lives to doing something about it. Spiritual suffering, physical suffering, the fact that the Beis Hamikdash has not been built, God's presence is not in the world properly. This is our life's mission. A Jewish people, so much of which is so lost. This is our life, this is our mission. It's true. But we have to also understand that no matter how hard we try, our efforts won't always work out the way we want them to. But one thing's for sure, we never take a shortcut. Because when the butterfly tries to make a tornado, it only makes life worse. Every input we put in has to count as if the whole of history depended upon it. You know that it's so easy in life to say, I quoted in the 8th chapter, it's actually the 9th chapter, I apologize, the 8th chapter builds up to it, but it's in the 9th chapter that he actually uses this expression of being mechubel kol hachayim, connected to all of life, and talks about the power of life versus death. What happens is as follows, is that it's so easy to say, who am I and what difference do I make in the world? So-and-so davens amazingly, so-and-so knows Shas and Poskim. I'll never know anything like they know in Torah. Does it really matter if I come to a learning Seder 5 minutes earlier or later? Does me putting my head right now into another Tosfos really matter? Does me not speaking Lashon Hara for 20 more minutes really matter? Does me giving some charity, a few shekel, dollars, whatever, here and there? There's billionaires who can impact the world. And it's true we have to want to impact the world. But it's also true that everything we do impacts the world. Everything we do, as long as we realize it's mechubel kol hachayim, this is connected to everything, and we realize if I put the right input into this, somewhere it will ripple across history and the whole world will benefit from it. Kiddush Hashem will happen. So whilst we've got to think as big as we possibly can, Moshe Rabbeinu, every gadol in the Jewish people thought about the whole nation, and we have to try to emulate that. They also thought about every individual who they ever came across. And they also understood that every single moment matters. Moshe Rabbeinu encountered Hashem when he went to rescue a sheep that had got lost of his father-in-law. That's when Hashem appears to him and tells him he's ready to change the world. No shortcuts. And no one person, you can have an organization that you think can change the world, and there's some annoying staff member who's just such a fool who's getting in the way. If only they'd just get out the way, you could change the world. And you don't realize Hashem sent you that difficult person, or that challenge, or that person who's not got the right skills, so that you would deal with them in the right way, with patience, with care, with love, and so on. That might change the world, at least as much as everything else you're doing, or more. And this is Shlomo Hamelech's incredible conclusion. And he starts talking this way. Shlach lachem chal b'nei hamayim. Go and send your bread across the water. Just keep pumping good into the world. Why? Ki lo seidam ki v'rov hayomim, because at the end of days, in most of the Timtza'ana, you'll find it. You will discover in the final chapter of history how every single positive thing you did rippled across history and changed the world forever. Tein Chenek, it's talking about all these things you should do. Just like you don't know which way the wind will blow, you don't know the work of God. He makes everything. Input into everything, and everything will change for the good. In the morning sow your seed. Don't give up in the evening. You don't know which one's going to be the one. I think I've shared it before, but I'm almost out of time, so let me just share this incredible Midrash. It's a Midrash appears at least twice in the Midrash Rabbah, I think Vayikra Rabbah, and then in Rus Rabbah, where it tells us, amongst other different characters in Tenach, three of them who, had they known their action was going to be written in Tenach, then have done it differently. I've shared this and I'll share it many times again, but it's so powerful. It's exactly from Koheles. Had Boaz known that how he treated Ruth the Moabite convert in the field, he would have given her gold. What is the meaning of that? You see, he had gone by another name, say Chazal, Ivtzon. And Ivtzon had been a judge of the Jewish people, a prophet, a great military leader, a spiritual leader, a Torah leader, a judge, everything. If we were to pause at that moment in life when we encounter Boaz in Ruth, the book of Ruth chapter 2, and we would have by now been able to write a multi-volume biography on him. One entire volume on the Torah he learned from a young age as a prodigy and all that he did and all his rulings throughout life. One on all his nevuahs and prophecies. One on his military campaigns. One on his leadership. All the amazing stuff. We would probably never have noted in there that he once walked past an orphan, a convert girl who's got no parents in town and treated her really nicely, gave her some grains. It just wouldn't have made it into our biography if we were writing it. But in the biography Hashem is writing, in Tenach, we don't know of a single prophecy of Boaz until later on in the book of Ruth. We don't know of a single ruling until later on in the book of Ruth. We don't know anything about all his decades of life before then. We don't know a single thing about his spirituality, nothing. The only thing we know about him is that he walked past the convert girl and made her feel good and gave her some grains. That's it. As if to tell you, that act can bring Mashiach at least as much as everything else. And of course it does. It leads them getting married, it leads them, her becoming the great-grandmother of David Hamelech, of Shlomo, of Mashiach, literally. In the final book of history, we'll learn everything Boaz did, because it's all in there too. But the point is that what Shlomo Hamelech is saying is, I thought I could use my wisdom. He said, I thought I could use my wisdom. I realized Hashem's vision is so far away that applies to understanding Torah, it applies to understanding life, it applies to the way he thought he could. He thought he was meters away from the end of history. Now's the time to bend the rules. Forget it. You can't do it. And he even talks about himself a number of times in Koheles about a king who gets taken over by somebody else, which is his negative drives. But by the end he realizes you can make a difference. You've just got to realize that you never know which moment of your life is going to make all the difference. You've got to try and change the world 100%, but always do it in the right way. Always do it according to Hashem's will. And keep doing things. You think this moment doesn't matter? This moment can change the world too. This little smile can change somebody else's life. And theirs will change somebody else's, and theirs somebody else's. And as COVID taught us, it takes about 12 weeks till your little action has impacted all 7 billion people on planet Earth. Never mind that it will keep rippling across history, and somebody somewhere won't get divorced, and somebody somewhere will have a child, and somebody somewhere will... And who knows what it's going to be. It's all going to be there. Because if you're mechuba el kol hachayim, let go of your self-centeredness, even if you're as great as Shlomo Hamelech, you can't do it, and enter the world where every moment and everything is part of the equation that only Hashem can do. And so he goes on, until he comes to his conclusion, almost echoing the beginning. Havel avolim oma hakoheles, havel hakol havel. Hakol havel, every individual is by themselves meaningless, meaning cannot do the whole thing. But, he says, let's start teaching others, because together we can. And his conclusion, soif dova hakol nishma, when you've heard everything at the end, because that's all where it matters, es elokim yirah, fear God, es mitzvos shmar, guard the mitzvahs, ki zeh kol adam, this all the human. You can misunderstand this. Sorry, you can think that what he's saying is basically life is 90% a waste of time. The mitzvahs are the things that matter. That's not what he's saying. If you're a really real Elohim, you're really aware and in awe of God, and you really understand what mitzvahs are, there isn't a moment of life that is not a mitzvah. There is when you eat food, you're connecting to Hashem. When you talk to somebody, you're connecting to Hashem. When you're going for a walk, you're connecting to Hashem. The whole of life is one flowing system where every single moment can ripple across history and change it all. Ki zeh kol ha'adam, not kol each in Adam, but the whole of mankind as one. When we see that we're within that, and that's what our actions are, then as Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin says, God forbid any Jew should ever say, what difference do my actions make? That's this low self-esteem. A human could walk in the world and say, I do nothing. You're a part of Kol Ha'adam, this thing. God will bring the whole of everything together. Not your action by itself, but how it impacts everything. That's what it'll bring. Al Kol Na'elam, on everything hidden. Im Toiv, Im Ra. You can serve God with the good and the bad. Just you do the good. Hashem will show how all the negative drives were actually a part of what got rectified in the whole. But all we've got to do, not all. What we've got to do is the word all. What we've got to realize is the power that, as Hillel said, in talking about his Simcha of Sukkos, if I'm here, everything is here. Because my moment can touch everything. And that means there is no person who is insignificant, and there is no moment that is insignificant. And you know, when we walk around, we take the arava that symbolizes the type of person who thinks they're insignificant. And tomorrow morning when we're going to walk around 7 times, right, that's on simultaneously, Hoshana, crying out to Hashem to give us the rain and all that we need for bracha, and to translate the bracha of Rosh Hashanah into our lives. And some of those are quite tearful moments. We're talking people who died for you, Hashem, Hoshana. And yet the Vilna Gaon says walking around is the time of Simcha. It seems like a contradiction. But in the present, there can be a lot of tears. But we also live in the big picture where everything comes together and makes sense. And we can live both lives simultaneously. It's not a contradiction. And we dance specifically in a circle. Because in a circle, that's what it'll be like in the future. Maharal, the circle is where everybody counts. Everybody, by the way, amazing thing you did, Hoshana, just a little thing you'll notice. If somebody stops to wait for the next person to go, the entire circle stops. You can't move unless you're all moving. Great rule in life. You need everybody. A circle is where everybody's connected to everybody. And that's how we dance with the Torah. That's how we dance Simchas Torah. That's how we dance with Hashem when Hashem says, I want one more day with you. Ashmini Atzeres. This is where we realize, and this is the secret to Simcha. The Rambam says in the end of Hilchas Lulav, the last halacha, literally, the joy a person should have in the doing of mitzvahs, and the love of Hashem who commanded them, it's huge work. And anyone who refuses to be involved in such a work, stay away from such a person because it brings curse to the world. And a person who humbles themselves in this issue, this matter, and lowers themselves and brings, humility or simcha? Arrogance means I'm trying to do it, I'm trying to be the hero. Forget it. Even if you're on the level of Shlomo Hamelech, even a small amount of it will bring the world crashing down. But Shlomo Hamelech taught us the answer. The humility to realize I'm part of this whole. And then all of a sudden, paradoxically, that humility means I matter. Says Shlomo Hamelech, he may have failed plan A, but he left us with plan B. He left us with the journey, the pathway, the message, Koheles. I gathered you once. Now I'm going to show you how to gather yourself again. Gather together. Realize the value in one another. Dance together. Realize you may not have finished the Torah this year, but the Jewish people did, and you learned some of it. Rejoice with that. Just rejoice with every bit you did, because it matters to the whole of creation, the whole world. And you'll find such joy that there's no joy like it, that every moment of my life is infinitely valuable to Hashem. Wow. That's what Koheles teaches us. And that's the simcha that he brings us. Hashem should help each one of us to feel that tremendous joy and to really understand that what we think, we may not think much of ourselves, Hashem thinks the universe of us. Just the humility to see ourselves as part of the picture, and suddenly we swell with the ability to bring about the whole thing. Hashem should help us get to the end of the story where we see the whole Kol HaChaim, everything brought together, where the whole world will come together to praise Hashem. To praise Hashem. In truth, we should be zoicha to see that and to be dancing together. With the Beis HaMikdash rebuilt,